When most people think of the French Revolution, they picture guillotines, mobs storming the Bastille, and a queen whispering, "Let them eat cake." We imagine a battle between tyranny and freedom, between monarchy and democracy. But that's not what really killed the French monarchy. Bread riots didn't topple Louis XVI. Economic collapse did. France didn't fall because the people suddenly discovered a love for liberty. It fell because its government destroyed its own money, bankrupted its treasury, and starved its population, all while the elite lived in luxury. The revolution wasn't philosophy brought to life. It was the inevitable result of financial suicide. And every decision that led to the guillotine, every riot, every crisis, every execution, began as an economic decision. The debt, the taxes, the currency collapse, the bread shortages, all of it can be traced back to one thing. France was broke. And the government's desperate attempts to hide that fact only made everything worse. This is the story of how bad economics murdered a kingdom. And if it sounds familiar, it should, because the same playbook is still being used today. To understand how France collapsed, we need to see how deep the hole really was. In 1788, just 1 year before the revolution erupted, France was the richest and most powerful nation in Europe. 28 million people, vast colonies, a mighty army. And Versailles, a palace so magnificent it embodied absolute monarchy itself. But beneath that gilded surface, France was drowning in debt. The treasury owed 4 billion livres, roughly twice the government's annual income. Half of all tax revenue went just to pay interest on those loans. That meant the state had to borrow simply to function, borrowing to pay interest on old borrowing, a financial death spiral. How did it get so bad? 3 reasons. First, war, decades of it. France had fought the 7 Years' War from 1756 to 1763, a global conflict that achieved nothing except draining the treasury. Then, in 1778, France backed the American Revolution, spending over 1 billion livres to help Washington defeat Britain. It was a geopolitical win and a financial disaster. Second, taxes. France's tax system was broken by design. The kingdom was divided into 3 estates. The first estate, the clergy, owned 10% of the land and paid almost nothing. The second estate, the nobility, owned another 25% and were largely exempt from taxation. That left the third estate, everyone else, from peasants to merchants, carrying the entire burden. The poor paid for the privilege of being poor. And third, spending. The royal court was a black hole for money. 6% of the entire national budget went to the king's household alone. Marie Antoinette's gambling debts, her designer gowns, her private theater, all financed by a government that couldn't pay its soldiers. While nobles gorged on elaborate banquets, peasants in the countryside chewed bark and grass to survive bad harvests. By 1788, the system was on the brink, and the government knew it. So they turned to the oldest trick in the political playbook: print money and hope no one notices. The year is 1789. Jacques Necker, France's finance minister, presents the king with a brutal truth. The treasury is empty. Creditors want payment. The debt is unpayable. Something must change. Louis XVI faces 3 choices. Option 1. Reform the tax system. Force the clergy and nobility to pay their share. It's the obvious solution and political suicide. The aristocracy would revolt, and Louis lacks the will to confront them. Option 2. Default on the debt. Refuse to pay, declare bankruptcy, start fresh. But that would destroy France's credibility and invite war from furious foreign lenders. So, option 3, a trick. Issue paper money backed by property the state already owns. In 1789, after overthrowing the monarchy, the revolutionary government seized church lands, worth an estimated 2 billion livres. They used that land to back a new currency, the assignat. Paper notes, supposedly exchangeable for real property. The idea was simple: print assignats, pay off the debt, and revive the economy. At first, it worked. Confidence returned. The economy stabilized. But once you give a desperate government the power to print money, it never stops. By 1790, they printed another 800 million, then another billion, then another. By 1795, France had printed over 40 billion livres in assignats. But the land backing remained the same. Real wealth didn't grow, only the paper promises did. And when you flood an economy with fake money, value evaporates. Inflation exploded. By 1795, the assignat had lost 99% of its value. Paper meant to represent 1 livre of land couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Wages collapsed. Savings disappeared. The middle class, the same group that supported the revolution, was wiped out. And the poor, who had dreamed of equality, were starving in the streets. The government responded with panic disguised as policy. In 1793, they passed the law of the maximum, setting legal price limits on bread, grain, and essentials. It was meant to stop inflation. Instead, it made survival a crime. Sell above the cap, the guillotine. But you can't legislate the price of wheat. When prices are capped below cost, producers stop producing, farmers hid their grain. Bakers shut their doors. Bread vanished from Paris, not because there was no wheat, but because it was illegal to sell it at a price that made sense. The revolution that promised liberty, equality, and fraternity had delivered poverty, chaos, and terror. By 1795, France was in freefall. Hyperinflation had turned the economy into ash. Prices rose by more than 13,000% between 1789 and 1796. A loaf of bread that cost 8 sous in 1790 now cost over 1,000. People carried sacks of assignats just to buy food. Some used the paper as wallpaper or fuel. It was worth more burned than spent. The collapse triggered 3 aftershocks. First, social collapse. The revolution promised equality but created new inequality. Those who owned gold or foreign currency survived. Those holding assignats were ruined. Speculators who bought land with devalued paper became rich overnight. The poor were crushed. Second, political terror. When the government couldn't fix the economy, it blamed the people, hoarders, counter-revolutionaries, merchants, bakers. Between 1793 and 1794, the Committee of Public Safety executed over 17,000 people. The guillotine became a tool not of justice but of fear. And third, Napoleon. By 1799, France was broken. After a decade of revolution, war, and chaos, the people wanted order. Napoleon Bonaparte promised it. He seized power, abolished the assignat, and created the franc, a currency backed by gold and silver that remained stable for a century. His message was simple: you can't print prosperity. But the damage was done. The revolution that began with dreams of liberty ended with dictatorship. And the root cause wasn't ideology, it was economics. Because this pattern isn't unique to France. In 1923, Weimar Germany printed money to pay its debts. A loaf of bread cost billions of marks. Hyperinflation destroyed the middle class and paved the way for Hitler. In 2008, Zimbabwe printed $100 trillion bills. Inflation hit 89.7 sextillion%. Savings evaporated. The economy collapsed. Between 2016 and 2020, Venezuela followed the same path: mass money printing. Currency collapse. Starvation. Exodus. Different nations, different centuries, same story. And today? Since 2008, central banks across the world have created more than $20 trillion in new money through quantitative easing. Governments run trillion-dollar deficits, financed by printing presses disguised as bond purchases. It's slower than the assignat, more sophisticated. But the mechanism is the same: create money out of nothing and hope inflation stays tame. So far, it's held. Sort of. But cracks are showing. Housing, healthcare, education, all spiraling in price. The wealth gap at record highs. Debt at historic levels. The French Revolution shows how this story ends. Not with a sudden crash, but with a slow decay, until collapse feels inevitable. The lesson is clear. Lesson 1. You cannot print your way to prosperity. Every nation that's tried, from France to Weimar to Zimbabwe, has failed. Lesson 2. Price controls don't stop inflation, they create shortages. When you make production unprofitable, production stops. Lesson 3. Economic collapse breeds extremism. When money dies, moderation dies with it. France's collapse led to the guillotine. Weimar's led to fascism. Every time, chaos creates the desire for control. Each step seemed logical in the moment. We need money, so we'll print some. Prices are rising, so we'll cap them. Bread is missing, so we'll punish hoarders. But every solution made the problem worse. The revolutionaries thought they could control the currency. Control the markets. Control the people. They were wrong. and millions paid the price. Are we repeating their mistakes? Not yet, but the warning signs are everywhere. Governments drowning in debt. Central banks creating trillions. Inflation rising. Extremes growing louder on both sides. France in 1788 believed its system was stable. By 1793, it was executing itself in the streets. The distance between order and collapse is shorter than you think. The French Revolution wasn't caused by philosophy. It was caused by math, ignored until it was too late. The guillotine wasn't the revolution. The assignat was. Everything else was just consequence. History doesn't repeat. But if you don't understand it, it will crush you just the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, you just have to know where to look.